This is the SF Productions Podcast Network.
Cars with an electric personality.
From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. Well, your father just invested in one of the new options in automobile tech, which is called a plug-in hybrid.
Yes, and it's a pretty nifty little car.
So thought it would be a good time to cover some new car technologies and some of the new things out there, especially with the price of gas going up and down all the time.
Yes, it regularly here in our area goes from like $3.15 to $3.80 in like overnight.
Right, yeah.
Or $3.80 to $3.45. It goes the other direction sometimes.
You never know. So I mentioned hybrid. So hybrid is pretty much what it sounds like. You take two kinds of technology and you fuse them together. And in this case, it's an electric motor with a traditional gas engine. So there's different kinds of hybrids. You can have what's called a full hybrid, which can run on the motor or the engine or both.
And the motor is the electric part.
Is the electric part.
Okay.
Yeah. And that includes the Toyota Prius, the Camry, the Highlander, the Ford Escape, Fusion, and C-Max. And there's also Lincoln variants of the Ford Escape. There's a Kia Optima. And there's some GM SUVs and trucks. And there's a lot of models of hybrids that are not even sold in the United States.
Do you think that's because, well, I don't know. I was going to say because there's not the plug-in charging stations, but a lot of those don't use charging stations.
Right, right. This is just regular hybrids.
Yeah,
So, and I do want to put a disclaimer in here. I'm the owner of now a second Prius, and I've got about 100,000 miles on that. I've been driving Priuses for over 10 years now. So, want to put that out there. Disclaimer. There's also what's called a mild hybrid, where they both run together. So the gas engine, the electric motor, both run together. They can't run separately. And so the idea is the electric motor just gives an assist to the gas engine.
And are they not quite as fuel efficient? Exactly,
because of that. The Honda Insight, there are some earlier GM models, and it really didn't gain much traction because it wasn't as efficient as a full hybrid. It's cheaper to do it that way. Then there's the plug-in hybrid, and that's a full hybrid plus, as the name states, you can plug them in. And so you can actually just plug them into the wall, and there's an option for a regular plug, or you can do what I think is a 220 plug.
Yes.
And that's the same plug you have if you have a dryer at home.
Right, and so that it would charge faster if you had the 220.
Right. So these are overall hybrids are least efficient when they're first started up for short trips because they're charging up the electric battery when you first start out.
So that's like your Prius, which is not a plug-in hybrid.
Right.
The regular Prius, it's not so efficient for short trips.
Right. So in this case, you plug the car in, it charges up the battery, so when you start the car, it's already charged, and you can immediately start taking advantage of the electric motor.
And in fact, what they told us about the Ford C-Max was that you drive the first 20 miles on electric alone.
Right, up to 20 miles.
So if you go anywhere that's less than 20 miles, you're never going to use gas.
Yeah, if you're just going to the grocery store and back or something like that, it's a great way to go. So models of that include the Chevy Volt. Now there's a big argument about that because some people say, no, it's actually a full electric. It really isn't. It does have a gas engine in it. So to me, that's not a full electric. The Toyota Prius has their own version of the plug-in, and the Ford C-Max has its own version of the plug-in, and that's in fact the car that your father purchased.
Yes.
Then you have full electric. Now, in the very early days of the automobile industry, many cars were built electric, based on electric motors, because it was just an extension of the electric trains and trolleys they had at the time. And it was a much easier thing to do, to build.
So did they run on the same things that the trolleys ran on? Or?
Well, no, they just had electric motors in them.
Oh,
just
okay.
like these today. But the thing was, you couldn't go very far because that was battery technology of, 1899, that type of thing. And even today, they still have a limited range because of the battery technology. There's only so much battery power you can throw at the thing before you're
too heavy to
give you any much
run,
advantage. Diminishing the advantage there. So that includes, now, Chevrolet Volt is also listed here. The Nissan Leaf, the Tesla Model S, and Tesla...
Of course, Tesla is the one we'd want.
Yeah, Tesla is a brand new company that has been built simply to build these electric cars. It's had lots of economic problems. Smart ED is another company, Fisker Karma. There's a Ford Focus Electric. There's a Honda Fit EV and a RAV4 Electric, and what are called neighborhood electric vehicles.
Are those like golf carts?
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, souped up golf carts. Okay, so that's the basics in terms of electric versus not, and then you've got alternate fuels. So diesel, it's huge in Europe. Apparently, France, like 70% of the cars are diesel cars. There were issues for years and years with them being dirty because they had the diesel had the sulfur in it. Now it doesn't have sulfur in it anymore. They've removed that. So it's much cleaner than it used to be. However, the U.S. air quality laws have still made it difficult to sell here.
So why are diesel cars better?
Well, the idea being it's an alternate fuel. You can go into things like biodiesel.
Okay.
So and that's so you basically you can drive your car and it smells like French fries because you got it from a local restaurant and you take their French fry medium and just stick in your
Okay.
And then there's flex fuel, which means ethanol and gas mixture. There are 15.1 in the U.S. as of 2012. Very popular in the Midwest because a lot of tractors run on those, and so farms will have ethanol locations to go to.
But that's not, from what I've read, actually very economical or actually good for the planet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just good for corn farmers.
Right, and that's why corn prices have gone up. And what's interesting is there was a study done in 2006, and they said that 68% of people who owned what they called flex fuel cars didn't know they had one.
So that you could run it on regular fuel or this fuel.
Yes, and so they didn't even know they had that option. Then there's things like liquefied petroleum gas, LNG. And this is basically propane and butane as a liquid. There's about 17 million cars worldwide, really has not taken off much in the U.S. Same thing with natural gas, about 14 million worldwide. And of course, the big issue with alternate fuel is the whole chicken and the egg thing. Few, if any, stations to refuel them at, so people won't buy the cars, but no one will build the stations because there aren't enough cars on the road. And it's starting to get a little bit of traction in the fleet vehicle area because if you can return to a central station, like your company goes ahead and puts in one of these alternative fuel stations, then you can just go there and do it.
Although I have to say that having looked it up now, there are a lot more places that are starting to put in charging stations for electric cars.
Yes.
Walgreens has charging stations. We saw a few parking lots or parking garages that had charging stations if you park there, and then you could go get validated at the local restaurant or something. So that was kind of neat.
Right. Yeah, of course, electric, it's not free, at least in some cases. If you're charging at home, you're paying on your electric bill.
Right.
You're not getting the fuel for free. So things are also on the drawing boards. There's hydrogen fuel, concept cars, and there's, so it's conceptual, but really hasn't made much traction at all because it's frankly a little dangerous to figure out how to get it to work correctly.
Yeah.
Which reminded me, back in the 60s, there was a concept car from Ford that supposedly used a nuclear engine.
Okay.
And it's a very strange looking car because it's a very long car, and you're way in the front, and the nuclear thing is way in the back.
So the driver is safe from the radiation, but not the people following you.
Exactly.
So what about solar? Because I know the Prius is using solar to cool down the car or something like that, right?
Right, but it just hasn't, at this point, it's not efficient enough to run a vehicle on its own. It's a good way to run things like accessories. And like you said, Prius has done that.
So maybe you'll want to look at an alternative fuel vehicle for your next car.
That's right.
But in the meantime, you can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.